She has no idea what she's talking about." "Mrs. Dembeck?" Laurie asks. "How would you know that? All she said so far is hello and I'll be right back." "She's had Ricky in her class for less than 2 months. How can she know anything about him?" "Ricky is the child that Laurie and I adopted 6 months ago, and Mrs. Dembeck is his third-grade teacher at school number 20. We're sitting in her classroom, squashed into 2 of the kids' desks. These desks were a lot bigger when I went to school here. The session has already started in an ominous fashion. As we were coming in, we saw our friends Sally and Brian Rubenstein, who had just finished their meeting about their son Will. Will, Ricky's best friend, is a great athlete, excellent student, and all-around terrific kid. Brian and Sally were all smiles with Mrs. Dembeck. No doubt their perfect child got a perfect report, and she's saving the bad stuff for Ricky. I hate perfect kids." "Just give her a chance, Andy." "These teachers don't know how to handle kids. They never have and they never will. When I was in 3rd grade, the teacher would put me out in the hall for talking." She thinks for a moment. "That's a good idea. Maybe I'll try it when we get home." "If she says anything bad about Ricky, she will live to regret it." "Hold that thought," Laurie whispers, as the door opens and Mrs. Dembeck walks into the room, an evil smile on her face. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she says as she sits at her desk. It's right in front of us, and even though she's maybe 5'4", with us hunched in these little desks, she towers over us. Her goal is obviously to gain the psychological advantage. "So, let's talk about Ricky," she says, looking through some papers in a folder in front of her. "I'm sure you know this, but he is a very special, very wonderful child." I nod and smile. It is a pleasure to hear a trained, dedicated professional like this talk about her work. She goes on to talk about how friendly Ricky is, how popular he is among his classmates, and how he clearly is a leader among his peers. This is a woman who knows what she is talking about. "Let's talk about individual subjects," she then says. "He's particularly proficient in mathematics." Laurie smiles. "I know. Sometimes the calculations he makes in his head amaze me." Mrs. Dembeck returns the smile. "I overheard him the other day lecturing his friends about point spreads." Uh-oh. I'm about to be busted. "Kids," I say. "You mean point spreads like in betting on sports?" Laurie asks her. "Yes, he's quite knowledgeable on the subject." "Kids," I repeat. "The things they pick up from their friends." Laurie is staring at me in a way that indicates she is not buying the bullshit I am selling. This comes as no great surprise to me. "How's he doing in history?" I ask. Laurie rolls her eyes as Mrs. Dembeck opens her mouth, almost as if the movements are synchronized. "History isn't part of the curriculum," she says, "but Ricky—" She stops when the door behind us opens. It's the principal of the school, Miss Jansing. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she says, "but there is an urgent phone call for Mr. Carpenter." I stand and immediately head for the door. I'm worried because in my experience the word urgent isn't used when the news is terrific. The other thing in my mind is how few people, if any, knew I was here. I follow Miss Jansing down the hall to her office, and I pick up the phone that is lying on her desk. "Hello?" "Andy, it's Pete." Pete Stanton is a close friend of mine and a captain in the Patterson Police Department. The fact that it's him is further evidence that this is not going to be good, and I experience a moment of panicked worry about Ricky, even though I know he is down the hall at gym class. "Is this bad news?" I ask. "Bad and worse," he says. "The bad news is that Brian Atkins escaped from prison." This makes no sense to me, but I've got a feeling that it's going to be downhill from here. "And the worst news?" I ask. "He killed 2 people. I was right. That is way downhill and doesn't compute with my understanding of him. "That can't be," I say. "Oh, it be," Pete says. "Are you his lawyer?"